Hi there, this is Mahar Haddad. So in this first lecture, I would like to explain about the MikroTik switching. So why it's important that we use MikroTik switching in our network, and what is the difference between the MikroTik switch and the MikroTik router, because I have seen a lot of cases where people are using the MikroTik switch as a router, or sometimes also the MikroTik router as a switch. So yeah, we have to understand why it's important that we really use a MikroTik switch to do the switching job, and we use the MikroTik router to do the routing job. So this is something I'm going to explain it in this chapter. Also, I'm going to speak to you about the switch chip, which is inside the MikroTik switches. So what is the function of this switch chip and why it's important that we can profit from it to be able to have more for example, traffic using the switch chip. So all of those things I'm going to explain to you in this lesson. So let's go directly and start with the explanation to see more about the difference between the MikroTik router and the switches, and speak about more the switch chip. Alright, so as you know, we have MikroTik routers and MikroTik switches. So when you want to buy a MikroTik device, you have to be careful that you are choosing the MikroTik device which is doing the job that you want for your network. So say that you want to buy a MikroTik device to do for you the routing and firewall and stuff like that. So then in this case, you have to think of buying a MikroTik router and not a MikroTik switch, because MikroTik do provide for you two possibilities. Of course, they have also other devices, but the two main devices that they sell is the MikroTik router and MikroTik switch. Both of them, they can do the layer 2 and the layer 3. So both of them, the router and the switch, can do routing and can do switching. But there will be a big difference on the performance if you buy a router to do switching or if you buy a switch to do routing. So there will be a big difference on the performance. And for this reason, I just put for you this comparison over here to show you, like, for example, we have here, this is the router, and we do have here switch. So this is a CCR 1072 router, and this one is CRS 317 switch. So first of all, you see the price is totally different. So this is really 3K you pay, and this one is almost like $400 US. Now, look on the difference. Of course, we see that, for example, the router this one has 72 core CPUs, while this one has a dual core CPU. So this is one of the difference. That means that the MikroTik can have more load on it than the switch. So that's where we have to think, like, if you buy a switch and you run on it, for example, BGP routing, so you end up having problems because the switch is not made to run BGP routing protocol. Now, if you look to the throughput on the router, for the router on layer 2, which is the data link layer, layer 2 means the switching part. It can give you something like 78.960 megabit per second. This one give you 43 megabit per second. So you see also a bit of difference over here. But the big difference is that, look at this one, the layer 3 throughput. So look what is the difference. That is 78 megabit per second, almost 78,000 actually megabit per second. And this one, 1,000. So you can see on layer 3, you are doing, I don't know, maybe like 70 times more bandwidth than you can do on the router, than you can do on the switch. So meaning that if you possibly want to run BGP routing protocol, or you want to run OSPF, or I don't know, you want to do firewalling, and you want to do a quality of service, and all those that take a lot of usage from your CPU. So over here you have 72 core CPU. This one has 2 core CPU. So yeah, if you want to use all of those things, which is routing, firewall, quality of service, of course we can add more than those ones. Then you better go for the routing. Now, if you want to do switching, like we'll see in this course, of course, because this is a course of switching. So like creating VLANs, I don't know, doing some spanning tree protocol. Yeah, so all of those things you can then buy a switch. And yeah, you save a lot of money, because a lot of people say, okay, I'm gonna do a routing, or I want to do firewalling or whatever. I want to buy a device. I see that this one is 400, this one is 3K. Then I will say, okay, I will go to that one. Why to pay 3,000? No, don't do that, because you will end up having more problems, and the problems will cost you more money to solve them than if you really buy the right device. So this is what I wanted to explain about the difference between the routing and the switching. Now, if we go back to the switching, we know that the MikroTik provide different type of switches. So if you want to buy the switch, the right switch, you have to know where you want to put it in your network. So big companies, they normally are divided into 3 layers, which we call them access layer, distribution, and core. Access layer means switches which are connected directly to end devices, like to the laptops, to the desktops, to the IP phones. So those are called access layer switches. So over here, you do not really need to buy the very advanced switching from MikroTik. You just buy the normal ones, which are, of course, cheaper, and they don't have a lot of resources that you can use. But that's fine because you have to put them on the access layer. Now, the same company, normally they also have distribution layer. So on the distribution layer, means like where you can do all type of bonding and the security. You apply security over there. So over here you have to buy the switches which are for the distribution layer. Means they should be bigger than the ones that you have put them on the access layer. All right. So the switches will do bonding to the core layer. So core layer is the layer which is the top layer. And that's where you have to put the biggest switches. So that's where all your traffic in your network is passing. Now, someone can say, but yeah, is it important that I only use the switches on the distribution layer, that I only put them on distribution? Can I not put the switch which is on distribution to use them in the core? Well, here, yeah, that's possible, but it depends on how your network is, or how big is your network. So say small to medium-sized companies, it doesn't matter anymore where you put them. Even though that there are a lot of companies, they don't even have the access, distribution, and core layers, because those are small companies. They just have one switch or 2 switches in their network, and that's it. So this switch is doing all the 3 layers. So yeah, it's based on the company size. It's based on how much traffic you have, based on what design you want to do. But I'm talking here about the theory that we think that you have a big company, and then in this case you better do on the design on 3 layers, and on every layer you have to select one type of switch, which is it should be based on what this layer is doing. So if you say that I want to connect to directly end customers, so go to the access layer, then you buy a normal small switch, and you don't have to pay and buy the one which is normally used for the core layer. All right, so MikroTik provide you different type of switches. You can choose the ones which are smaller, you put them on the access, the bigger, a bit bigger, you put them on the distribution, and the biggest one, you put them on the core layer. So now we understand about the design. Let's speak a little bit about what are the switches that you can put them on each layer. So here I have made this, of course, this is just a small example. Yeah, you can also look on MikroTik website to see maybe the other switches that you would like to use. But for example, if you want to use on the access layer, you can use this switch, CRS 326. So it gives you that much of layer 2 speed or throughput. So that's 43 megabit per second. And then if you want to use distribution, you can go for this switch, CRS 328. You see that the throughput is a bit higher. And if you want to use the core, then you use this 326/24S plus 2Q plus RM. And you can see it gives you way much more speed or throughput than the one which is over here. All right, so yeah, again, it depends. Also, you can look at the price. So you see the price is also different. So if you are using access layer, you just pay $200. You can use a switch. If you want to use for core layer, you just have to increase your budget to $500 to use a switch for the core layer. But again, this is not really mandatory that you buy those switches that I'm showing you. It's up to you. You have to go to the MikroTik website, look what switches they have, and then you decide which of the switch you would like to buy. Also, it doesn't only depend on the switch capability, but also it depends on your budget. That's the biggest part, which is your budget, because you may not have a budget. Maybe you need a switch to put it on the core, but you don't have a budget to pay $500. Then maybe you say, well, I would go for the access layer because I don't have too much of throughput, and I think that can do the work, or that's going to do the job. That's also possible. But here we're talking theoretically, ideally, what should be done. All right, so now we understand the different types of layers. Let's start speaking about the switch itself and see what the switch has inside of it, which we call the switch chip. So what is the function of the switch chip and why it's important to profit from the switch chip? So every switch from MikroTik comes with a switch chip. So what is the switch chip? It's nothing more than a chip which is inside the box of the MikroTik switch where the ports are connected to. So meaning if you have one computer, say, that you want to send to another computer on the same network, and both are connected to two different ports. So what happens is that the traffic will come to the first port, which is also connected to the switch chip, and then the switch chip will just link it to the second port without it goes to the CPU of the switch. This makes the traffic to go much faster and also will help that the load on the CPU to be much lower. So that's why it's very important that we can profit from the switch chip, and that's something we call it hardware offload. And of course you have seen it possibly when you add your ports inside the bridge, you have the hardware offload checked. So then you are doing or you are using the switch chip in this case to send the traffic. Now if you don't have a switch chip, then all the traffic will go to the CPU, and then the CPU will send them to the second port. If you don't have a switch chip, mostly on routers we see that. And then in this case, we call it software offload and not hardware offload. Hardware offload, it means that it is using the hardware, which is the switch chip, to send the traffic from one port to another. While software offload means that it has to go to the CPU and to be able to go from one port to another. Now, I do have now this representation about, this is a CCR 1072, so this is a router. It's not a switch. And you can see I do not have any place over here having a switch chip. You can see that this is a CPU, and on the CPU, the SFP ports, you see SFP 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and so forth, all are connected to the switch. So meaning that if the traffic is going from one port to another, it has to go to the CPU, and the CPU has to send it to the other port, which makes things to be going slower, and also there will be load on the CPU. So this is a representation on a MikroTik router to show you that MikroTik router do not have, not all of them, some of them, I would say the biggest one, do not have a switch chip. Now let's look about the other router which we have here, which is the router board 4011. So this router, you can see we have a switch chip. You can see this is one switch chip here, and it is one switch chip here. You can see that ports from 1 to 5 are connected to one switch chip, and port from 6 to 10 are connected to one switch chip. Meaning that if the port Ethernet 1 want to reach to Ethernet 2, it goes to the switch chip and directly send it. Without it goes to the CPU. Same of 6 to 7 also it do like that. Now if it has to go from 1 to 6, or let's say from 4 to 9, so now 4 to 9, they are not anymore with the same, on the same switch chip there, because there are 4 is connected to one switch chip and 9 is connected to another switch chip. So what's going to happen, that it will go like this, it goes to the CPU and then it goes to 9. So in this case we have to put in mind that in case we do have two switch chip in the same MikroTik switch, so traffic from one port to another which are not connected to the same switch chip will have to go through the CPU. Okay, let's take another example also. So this is an example for the CRS 326, so that's 300 series switch, and we can see we do have here, this is a switch chip, and we see that we have the SFPs, and so we have all the ports are connected here, so 26 port that are connected to the switch chip. So we have this is SFP, 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 and this is QSFP+. So all of those are connected to the switch chip. Okay, let's see another one also. Now we have the CRS 328, and on the CRS 328 also we can see that it is a switch chip sitting up over here, and all the ports including the combo, so the SFP and the combo, they are all connected to the switch chip. Also those one, the SFPs. So we have 4 times 10 gigabit per second SFP+. So all they are connected to the same switch chip. So meaning that traffic can pass through the ports without going to the CPU. And the last example that I would like to show you here is about the CRS326-24G2S plus RM. So also we can see, yes, we have here the switch chip, and it is 26 ports. So we have here 24 Ethernet ports and 2 SFP plus ports. So on total, there are 26 ports. They are all for the same switch chip. Now we understand what is the switch chip. Let's see the feature in this switch chip. So every switch chip, if you see here, if let me just go to one example. I show something on one example here. Yeah, this one. This one, you see it, the 98DX8332. So this is type of switch chip. On MikroTik, there are different types of switch chips. So it's not they don't have all the switch chips similar on all the MikroTik switches. So there are different types, and if each of the type can provide you some feature, and that's something I have here showing to you. That first, let's say that each switch chip has different features that you can use for configuring the switch. Some of the features are port switching, port mirroring, VLAN, bonding, and so forth. We are going to speak about most of them during this course. But yeah, this is what I have put for you here. I took it from MikroTik website, the representation that you can see. Those are the features: port switching, port mirroring, TX, and so forth. And each of model of the switch chip can support something and cannot support something else. Okay. So you can see that, for example, this one support everything, and here how much you have entries for the host, for the VLAN, and how many rules you can create. This one also Atheros 8327, Atheros 8316, and so forth. So meaning that when you want to buy a switch, then you better look what is the switch chip inside this switch. And then you come to the MikroTik website, or maybe to my slide, to my video here, and you see what you can have on those switch chip models as features. And then based on that, you say if it is good for you or not. So also this one is another one. So those things you have to always put in mind, that whenever you want to buy a switch, then look at the switch chip and see what features this switch chip can provide for you, and based on that you can say, well, this is the right product that I want to buy. Now in the last slide of this lecture, I'm going to speak about the different types of switches. So we have actually the main three types of switches we use are the CRS. We have CRS 100 series, CRS 200 series, CRS 300 series. Which one to use? I highly recommend to always use CRS 300 series. That's the best, to be honest. And this course will be based on the CRS 300 series. Okay. Now there is also another type of switch. We call it the CSS, which is Cloud Smart Switch. You may have it also, but this one comes only with the Switch OS operating system. While those series here, you can run the Router OS, the normal Router OS. You can also run Switch OS if you want. But yeah, Switch OS is based on a web interface, and it's not too advanced like what you have on the Router OS. That's why I highly recommend that you use the 300 series switch using Router OS to be able to do the advanced jobs that you want to do on switching. Also, another thing why to use the CRS 300 is because you can profit from all features that the switch chip can provide you. So you can see, this is also a table I took it from the MikroTik website. So this is the CRS 300 series. Look, it has features on the switch menu: bridge STP, RSTP, bridge MSTP, bridge IGMP snooping, bridge DHCP snooping, bridge VLAN filtering, bonding. So it covers everything. While the other ones, like for example CRS 100 and CRS 200, you can see that over here it doesn't have bridge VLAN filtering and doesn't support bonding, and so forth. So that's why I highly recommend that whenever you want to think of buying a MikroTik switch, I highly advise you to always think to have a CRS 300 series. And there are different types of on the CRS 300 series. You can buy the biggest one, the smallest one, but it should be 300 series, because then it's much better for you as for the configuration, and also as for the performance for the switching on your network. So this is all what I wanted to show in this first lecture about the switching. So we understand now the difference between the routing and switching, why we should really buy a switch when we want to do switching in our network and not to buy a router. I also spoke about the switch chip and the benefit of the switch chip, and I explained that there are different types of switch chips. We have to know which type we are buying, which is inside every switch, to know what features can provide it for us. And finally, I advised you to go for a CRS 300 series as a switch, because we do have different type of switches, like I already explained, but the 300 series can support all features. So that is all what I wanted to show you in this first lecture. I hope it was informative for you, and I will see you in the upcoming lecture.